At a family dinner, my brother said, "No man will ever marry a woman who makes more than him." I raised my glass and said, "Then it's a good thing I bought my husband's company last week." The room fell silent when he checked the shareholder list. "My name is Lorraine. I'm 44. I've been married for almost 10 years to a man named Riley. We both work in tech-adjacent industries, though my career has taken a different trajectory than his." We were at my parents' house in Newark, New Jersey, for a long-overdue family dinner. It was one of those everyone under one roof for the first time in years situations. The food had been served, the wine was flowing, and people were starting to loosen up. That's when my older brother Noel, older by 5 years, decided it was the perfect time to offer his unsolicited opinion on gender roles. "No man," he said, swishing the wine in his glass like he was some philosopher, "wants to be with a woman who makes more than him. No real man." I could feel my husband shift beside me. He didn't look angry, just tired. I hadn't planned to say anything. I wasn't even sure it was worth it. But the way Noel said it, like it was some unshakable truth, triggered something. I raised my glass and said without blinking, "Then it's a good thing I bought Riley's company last week." Noel froze. There was dead silence. He pulled out his phone to check, like he didn't believe me. He found the updated shareholder report. He hasn't spoken to me since. Because that one moment didn't come out of nowhere, it was the tip of a very large, very toxic iceberg. I come from a working-class Irish-American family. My dad, Patrick, worked for the Newark Water Department his whole life. He's honest and hard-headed, with a deep suspicion of anyone who acts too good for their roots. My mother, Sheila, was more soft-spoken but often enabled that mindset by staying neutral on everything. Noel was the eldest. He was always the loudest, most praised, and the most coddled. He played football in high school, was popular, got into Rutgers, and now works at a mid-sized bank. He's been stuck at the VP level for years. He makes good money, no doubt, but he has always had something to prove. To himself, to us, to women. Then there's Marcus, my other brother, who's 7 years younger than me. He joined the Navy out of high school, came back quieter, more deliberate. He lives in San Diego now and only comes back for major family events. He doesn't talk much but sees everything. Brenna's the baby. She teaches special education in Virginia and has 2 kids under 10. Sweet as honey but conflict avoidant to the extreme. She usually plays peacemaker, but it's taken a toll on her. And then there's me. I was the quiet one, the one who read in corners and obsessed over homework and science projects. I got a full ride to Carnegie Mellon, double majored in engineering and computer science, and started working in software logistics straight out of school. By 30, I'd launched a tech startup in supply chain optimization. At 38, I sold that company and netted $27 million post-taxes and fees. I kept most of that information away from my family. I didn't want the attention, and I certainly didn't want Noel's commentary. I met Riley during a vendor negotiation meeting. He was COO at a partner firm. He wasn't flashy. He was smart, warm, and never once made me feel like I had to shrink myself to be with him. We dated long distance for a while before he moved to Jersey and started his own consultancy business. It did pretty well, and I quietly invested in it. Not as his wife, but as a venture partner through my firm. We kept the ownership structure quiet for business reasons, but after a few years, as the company grew, I decided to acquire it outright. It made business sense and simplified management. I gave Riley full autonomy as managing director, but on paper, I became the principal shareholder and CEO. I hadn't planned to tell anyone at the family dinner, but when Noel made that remark, it just came out. And I don't regret it. What happened after, though? That's where things really got messy. Noel didn't just stew in silence. He launched a full campaign to discredit me, starting with whispering to Sasha, his fiancée, that I was emasculating Riley, that our marriage must be fake or broken, and that Riley must be hiding something. He even told her that women who chase money don't make good wives or mothers. I found this out from Sasha herself, who reached out to me privately a few weeks later. She was shaken. She said she'd had doubts before. Noel had a temper, was dismissive of her ideas, constantly made digs when she got a promotion at work. But this confirmed it. I told her, gently but firmly, that if she wanted a life of being second-guessed and talked down to, then by all means marry Noel. But if she wanted respect, She'd need to find someone who didn't view relationships as a hierarchy. Sasha left him that week. Noelle, predictably, lost it. Not on her, on me. He sent this long email to the entire family, claiming I'd interfered in his relationship, that I was trying to buy respect, and that Riley was just a puppet whose strings I pulled. He even threw in some half-baked story about Riley cheating, which had no basis in reality. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and set a boundary. I wasn't going to let this man weaponize his insecurities against me anymore. Instead of firing back, I took action where it mattered. I sat down with a lawyer and drew up paperwork to purchase the remaining mortgage on our parents' house. I paid it off in full and transferred the deed into a trust controlled by Brenna and Marcus. I knew they'd take care of our parents without the constant passive aggression and guilt-tripping Noelle was known for. Then I created a private care fund for my parents' medical expenses, completely separate from Noelle's reach. No one said anything directly, but I think they understood what I was doing. I was drawing a clear line in the sand. I was stepping in, not because I needed power, but because I couldn't watch Noelle use his fragile ego to keep pulling everyone down. Since then, Noelle has gone quiet. He moved to another state, probably out of embarrassment or spite. I don't care. I've blocked him on everything. Brenna is still processing it all. She told me she feels like the glue that's been holding things together all these years has finally cracked. Marcus, in his quiet way, just sent me a text after the whole fallout. It said, "About time." Riley has been incredibly supportive through all of it. He never once asked me to stand down. He told me he felt proud to be with someone who stood her ground without raising her voice, who spoke her truth without trying to humiliate anyone. Though, to be honest, Noelle did that all on his own. Our marriage is strong. Stronger than it's ever been, actually. Working together in this new structure has made us appreciate each other in different ways. He respects me as a business leader, and I respect him as someone confident enough not to be threatened by a woman's success. I wish I could say that moment at the dinner table was just a funny story I'd tell at parties. But it wasn't. It was a rupture, an exposure of something I'd known was brewing for years but didn't want to admit. That some family wounds don't heal just because you hope they will. Some need to be cauterized. That night didn't just change how Noelle sees me. It changed how I see myself and what I'm willing to accept even from family. In the weeks following the dinner, things didn't simmer down, they shifted. There was a new kind of silence in the family group chat, the kind that doesn't feel like peace, but more like a temporary ceasefire. Messages turned perfunctory. No more funny videos from Dad. No more passive-aggressive memes from Noelle. Just the occasional logistics question from Brenna about birthdays or appointments for our parents. I knew Noelle was still angry. Marcus told me he'd reached out to him, ranting about how corporate money was destroying family values, that I'd undermined a man in his own relationship and weaponized feminism. Marcus didn't respond to that part. He just told him flatly, "Maybe it's time to stop talking and start listening for once." Noelle didn't reply. What struck me, though more than Noelle's tantrum, was how my parents reacted, or rather, how they didn't. There was no phone call from my dad to talk it out, no vague maternal guilt trip from Mom telling me to just apologize so we can all move on. Nothing. It wasn't until almost a month later that Mom called. She asked if Riley and I could come for dinner, just us, no siblings. I said yes, curious and admittedly bracing for something dramatic. When we got there, Mom had made her classic roast lamb, and Dad had that look on his face like he was walking into a courtroom he didn't want to be in. The dinner started quietly, updates on Brenna's kids, a vague comment about the weather, and then a pause. "You know," my dad said, chewing slowly, "your brother's always had his own way of seeing things." That was his attempt at easing into it, I think. My mom added, "He says you embarrassed him, Lorraine." I nodded. "He embarrassed himself, I just told the truth." There was another pause, then she surprised me. "Well," she said, "maybe the truth needed saying." I almost didn't know how to respond to that. Dad sighed and poured himself another glass of wine. "He's not going to apologize. He won't see it. Not now, maybe not ever." "I'm not waiting for an apology," I said. "But I'm also not pretending like nothing happened." He nodded. That was the best agreement I think I've ever gotten from him when it came to Noelle. They didn't ask me to patch things up. They didn't defend him. They just accepted it. And that, in a way, was more shocking than anything else. After that night, I started realizing just how many small concessions I'd made over the years to keep the family functioning. Holding my tongue, laughing off Noelle's comments, downplaying my work, my life, my success. For what? Peace? No. Not peace, silence. And silence wasn't serving anyone anymore. At work, things were evolving quickly. Riley's company, now ours, was flourishing with the restructuring. I had brought in a new operations director so Riley could focus on strategy, and I stayed mostly hands-off except for board decisions. We worked well together, but more importantly, we respected each other's space. He told me one night over dinner, "I've never seen you more yourself than you've been these past few months." That made me pause. I had felt different, lighter in some ways, though burdened in others. Like shaking off a heavy coat you didn't realize you were wearing. Sasha and I stayed in touch after her breakup with Noelle. She moved into a condo across the river in Hoboken and started dating someone new, an architect, quiet and kind. She said she felt free, like she could finally talk about her dreams without being told they were impractical. "I used to think something was wrong with me," she admitted during one of our coffee meetups. "Like I was too ambitious, too emotional, but it was just him, wasn't it?" I didn't say much, just nodded. Sometimes, validation is more powerful in silence. Meanwhile, Marcus came through town on a work trip and stayed with us for a weekend. One night, as we sat on the porch with beers, he brought up Noelle. "I think he always resented you," Marcus said without blinking. "Not for being successful, but for not needing any of us." That hit like a brick. He continued, "Noelle needs to feel needed. When you bought Riley's company, you showed him that you didn't just have your own life, you could influence someone else's. That scared the hell out of him." I thought about that for a long time after he went back to San Diego. Was it true that I never needed them? Or had I just gotten used to not being able to rely on them? The next few months passed in a strange blend of clarity and distance. I began to notice things I hadn't before, how many of my female colleagues had similar stories, how often women downplayed their wins to protect a man's pride, how coded our silence was. It wasn't just about Noelle anymore. It was about every time I'd watched women shrink so the men around them wouldn't feel small. It was about the endless performance we were expected to give, be successful, but not intimidating, assertive but not bossy, accomplished but always humble. I was done performing, but I hadn't fully processed what this meant for my family dynamic. Was the silence from Noelle permanent? Would holidays become a minefield? Would my parents always now feel like they had to balance us instead of just accepting the divide? The part of me that wanted a whole, happy family was mourning. But the part of me that had spent years biting her tongue. She felt free, and I didn't know what to do with both of those feelings living side by side. Even Riley noticed it. One night, while we were watching something on Netflix and I wasn't really paying attention, he paused the show and turned to me. "You keep waiting for it to feel worse," he said. I looked at him, confused. "Losing him, you think you should feel more guilt, more grief, but you don't, and it's confusing." It was like he read my mind. I let out a shaky breath and whispered, "Yeah." He didn't say anything more, just took my hand. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that not all losses are tragedies. Some are transformations. The following fall, I received an unexpected invitation. It was a glossy envelope with Noelle's return address in the corner. Inside was an invitation to a corporate seminar he was hosting through his bank's Professional Growth and Leadership series. The flyer was thick cardstock, the colors serious, the font assertive. Right below his name in bold were the words, "Empowering the next generation of leaders in a competitive world." It was laughable. I showed it to Riley that evening, holding it up with 2 fingers like it was radioactive. "He's either delusional," I said, "or he thinks I'm going to forget everything and come clap for him in a hotel ballroom." Riley glanced at it. "Maybe he's hoping you'll be impressed." I didn't RSVP. I didn't attend. But I didn't ignore it either. Instead, I made a few calls. Noelle's bank had a somewhat stagnant reputation in corporate circles. Mid-level, no innovation, lots of bureaucracy. His department, the one he had been trying to rise through for years, was rumored to be struggling with client retention. I knew this not because I was watching him, but because, as it turns out, our worlds had become much smaller than I realized. A friend of mine, Marnie, who now ran a high-level consulting firm in NYC, had recently signed a contract with a logistics platform that was quietly seeking to move their financing to a firm with better digital infrastructure and lower executive turnover. And Noel's bank was on the short list of places they were looking to leave, so I asked Marnie a favor. "Don't pull out, not yet," I said. "Schedule a meeting, ask for their top-performing VP, make sure it's Noel. Let him give you the pitch." She raised an eyebrow. "You want me to waste a Thursday for a man you hate?" "No," I replied. "I want you to help me remind him who he's talking to." So she did. 2 weeks later, Noel walked into a Manhattan office wearing a sharp suit and carrying a leather portfolio, thinking he was about to win over a lucrative contract. He was met by Marnie and two of her senior analysts. And me. I didn't say anything when he entered the room, just sat there, cool as glass at the end of the conference table. His face fell, but he held it together, for a while. He began his pitch, voice tight, eyes flicking to me like I was a ghost. Halfway through, he mentioned competitive digital solutions and long-term trust in traditional leadership. I waited until the room grew quiet, and he asked if there were any questions. I leaned forward. "Noel," I said gently, "how would your department structure support a fintech migration while maintaining transparency across third-party integrations?" He froze. I knew the answer. He didn't. He stammered something vague about internal frameworks and review protocols. Marnie gave me a glance permission. "Well," I said, closing my folder, "I appreciate the time. But I think it's clear this relationship won't serve our goals. Thank you for coming in." Noel didn't speak. His jaw twitched. And when he left, it wasn't with pride. It was with the knowledge that he'd just been professionally dismissed by the sister he once told to stick to HR work because that's where women usually do best. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud, but it was, for him, devastating. Marnie leaned back and whistled. "You're good." I didn't even enjoy it, I admitted. But that wasn't entirely true. A few months later, Brenna called. She said Noel had moved again, this time to a smaller city upstate, and took a demotion under the guise of a more flexible position. His engagement with Sasha never rekindled. He was alone. She asked if I'd consider making peace. I thought about it long and hard, not out of guilt, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't becoming the kind of person who mistook punishment for closure. I told her the truth. "I don't want revenge," I said. "Not anymore. I just want space and respect." She didn't push, she understood. Marcus, as usual, said very little when I updated him, just nodded and said, "He needed the fall more than you needed the fight." He was right. That Christmas, we gathered again at the house in Newark. Noel wasn't there. The air was lighter, easier. Dad still grumbled about technology and Mom still fussed over dinner, but there was laughter again. Real laughter. Brenna's kids ran around the living room while Riley played the piano, badly, and Marcus tried to fix a broken heater in the basement with some duct tape and a half-drunk bottle of cider. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat. But it was whole. After dinner, Brenna poured me a glass of wine and we sat on the back porch under the fairy lights she'd strung up earlier. "You know," she said, "I don't think I've ever said thank you." "For what?" "For standing up. For not letting it keep going like it always did." I smiled. "It had to stop somewhere. You stopped it. And for the first time, I believed it. This wasn't just about Noel's remark at dinner. It was about decades of dismissal. About being told, implicitly and explicitly, that your worth should be measured against how palatable you are to others, especially men. Buying Riley's company? That wasn't revenge. But living in a marriage built on mutual respect. Running businesses without apology, speaking truth even when it makes people uncomfortable. That was the real revenge, the kind that doesn't need fireworks, or cruelty, or chaos. Just a woman fully in her power with nothing to prove. And no one left to shrink for.